At the age of 87, Lee Majors has lived long enough to look back on the most important chapters of his life. He was once one of the most recognizable faces on American television, a symbol of strength and success. But as the spotlight gradually faded into the background, what remained in his mind was not his legendary roles, but a woman he never truly forgot. From the outside, their marriage once seemed like a Hollywood dream. They were attractive, famous, and featured across countless magazine covers. But behind those perfect photographs, a growing distance was quietly taking shape as both of them became consumed by the demands of fame and work. What hurt Lee the most was that everything did not begin with a scandal or a dramatic argument. It began with loneliness. As work frequently kept him away from home, he worried that the woman he loved would feel isolated in the vast city of Los Angeles. So Lee did something entirely ordinary. He called a close friend and asked him to take his wife out for dinner from time to time so she would have someone to talk to while he was away. It was simply a small favor between people who trusted one another. But many years later, Lee Majors would remember that moment as a turning point in his life. Because he had no idea that this seemingly insignificant decision would change everything forever. To understand why this story left such a profound mark on him, we need to return to the very beginning of Lee Majors' life, a young orphan who grew up carrying a deep fear of losing the people he loved most. His father died in a workplace accident before he was born. Just over a year later, his mother was killed in a car accident. At only 18 months old, Lee became an orphan before he had even had the chance to remember the faces of either parent. He was adopted by relatives and raised in a loving home, yet his curiosity about his origins never disappeared. As a teenager, Lee accidentally discovered an old box in the attic. Inside were newspaper clippings about the deaths of his parents. It was the first time he truly understood his own story. Rather than being broken by tragedy, Lee turned it into motivation. He constantly reminded himself that he had to live well so that the people who had raised him would never regret taking in the orphaned little boy all those years ago. That mindset stayed with him throughout the rest of his life. At school, sport became his escape. Lee excelled at American football and once dreamed of becoming a professional athlete. But a serious back injury brought that dream to an abrupt end. With his future suddenly uncertain, he unexpectedly found himself heading down an entirely different path: acting. His major breakthrough came when he beat more than 400 other applicants to win a role in The Big Valley, surpassing several well-known actors of the time, including Burt Reynolds. On set, he met veteran actress Barbara Stanwyck, who taught him lessons that no acting school could provide. Always be on time, know your lines, hit your marks, and most importantly, learn when to keep your mouth shut in the entertainment industry. Those seemingly simple principles helped Lee Majors build a reputation as a professional and dependable actor. But even as his career flourished, his personal life still had many twists and turns ahead. And only after several relationships that failed to last would he meet the woman who would change his life forever. Before becoming one of Hollywood's most famous couples, Lee Majors experienced his share of heartbreak and disappointment. His first marriage to Kathy Robinson took place when they were both very young. They had a child together, but as Lee's acting career began to grow, so did the distance between them. Busy schedules and differing priorities eventually made the marriage impossible to save. After that came several notable relationships, including actress Patty Chandler and later Sally Field. With Sally, Lee shared a meaningful period while both were working in the entertainment industry. However, like many Hollywood romances of that era, the relationship came and went before it could become something lasting. Then, in 1968, another meeting occurred in a way nobody could have predicted. At the time, Farrah Fawcett was an ambitious young model from Texas, while Lee was steadily establishing himself in Hollywood. Their first date went worse than anyone could have imagined. Lee arrived late, failed to make much of an impression, and was almost certain he had ruined his chance. But instead of giving up, he tried to make amends. The following day, Farrah received 13 yellow roses from Lee Majors. That simple gesture changed everything. What began as brief conversations gradually turned into more time spent together. Before long, a serious relationship had developed. At that point, Farrah was still a young woman searching for her place in the entertainment industry. Lee was already more established and was often seen as her source of support during her early years in Hollywood. Friends later recalled that Farrah placed almost complete trust in Lee, from career decisions to choices in her personal life. In 1973, they married. To the public, they appeared to be the perfect combination of a rising star and one of the most beautiful women in America. No one realized that within a few years, the very fame they both pursued would become the greatest challenge their marriage would ever face. And as Hollywood entered the 1970s, Lee Majors' fame exploded at a pace even he had never anticipated. In 1974, The $6 Million Man premiered and quickly became a global phenomenon. Within a short period, Lee Majors went from being a familiar television actor to one of the most famous men in America. The image of Steve Austin, the bionic hero rebuilt through advanced technology, appeared everywhere, from television screens and magazine covers to children's toys. While Lee's career reached extraordinary heights, he also tried to use his position to help his wife. At the time, Farrah Fawcett was still searching for the role that could elevate her to stardom. Lee introduced her to producers, helped her gain opportunities in major projects, and was one of the people who encouraged her to accept a role in a new television series called Charlie's Angels. No one could have predicted that the show would transform Farrah into a cultural phenomenon. Within only a few months, she became the most sought-after face in Hollywood. Her famous red swimsuit poster sold millions of copies around the world. Years later, Lee revealed that he himself had selected the final photograph used for that iconic poster. For the first time in their marriage, both of them had become superstars with schedules that left almost no free time. Constant flights, long filming days, and promotional commitments meant they were living in two completely different worlds. At one point, over the course of nearly a year, Lee and Farrah spent only about 2 weeks together. That distance gradually created cracks in the relationship. They still loved each other, but they shared less and less of the everyday details that keep people connected. Meanwhile, relentless media attention surrounded them. Every decision they made became a headline. Believing that Farrah had the potential to become a major film star, Lee encouraged her to leave Charlie's Angels and pursue bigger projects. The advice came from love and confidence in his wife's talent. But that decision triggered a chain of complications nobody could have foreseen. Farrah became entangled in legal disputes with producers, and the film projects that followed failed to achieve the success she had hoped for. As both of their careers began facing different kinds of pressure, their marriage became more fragile than ever. Then, in 1979, during what seemed like an ordinary telephone call from Toronto, Lee Majors made a request he would remember for the rest of his life. In 1979, Lee Majors was in Toronto filming for several consecutive weeks. The distance between him and Farrah was no longer measured only in thousands of miles. Years of demanding schedules had created emotional distance between them as well. Even so, Lee still believed that their marriage could survive this difficult period. During a conversation, he contacted Ryan O'Neal, a friend he knew well and trusted. Ryan was also one of Hollywood's biggest stars at the time. As they discussed everyday matters, Lee mentioned that Farrah was spending a great deal of time alone in Los Angeles and seemed lonely. Then he made a very simple request. If Ryan had the time, perhaps he could occasionally take Farrah out for dinner or invite her to social gatherings with friends. To Lee, it was merely a favor between close friends. He had absolutely no reason to doubt someone he trusted so completely. But what began as a few harmless meetings gradually changed. While Lee continued traveling constantly for work, Ryan and Farrah spent more and more time together. They talked, shared thoughts that perhaps neither of them felt able to share with anyone else, and at some point their friendship crossed a line it had never crossed before. What made it even more painful was that Lee was not the first person to find out. Rumors surfaced before he ever received a clear answer. Like so many others, he had to watch his marriage fall apart from the outside while the media endlessly speculated about what was happening. Years later, Lee rarely spoke in detail about that period. Yet whenever he did mention it, people could still sense the sadness that remained. It was not anger, nor was it the dramatic sense of betrayal often associated with Hollywood stories. What hurt him most was realizing that he had lost the woman he loved while dedicating himself to building the career they had both once pursued. He later admitted that he felt deeply lonely during those years. At the very height of his fame, he found himself missing the one thing that mattered most whenever he returned home. Success on screen could not fill the growing emptiness in his personal life. The marriage between Lee Majors and Farrah Fawcett eventually came to an end. But rather than allowing that pain to define the rest of his life, Lee kept moving forward. And in the years that followed, he would prove that his story did not end with Hollywood's most famous divorce. When his marriage to Farrah Fawcett officially ended in the early 1980s, many people believed Lee Majors would never regain the position he once held. Hollywood had always been notoriously unforgiving to television stars, especially those closely associated with a single iconic role. But Lee refused to become a man trapped in his past. Instead of dwelling on stories about his highly publicized divorce, he returned to work. In 1981, Lee took the lead role in The Fall Guy. The series quickly became a success and once again established him as one of television's leading stars. Audiences loved the image of a strong, witty man who always found a way to overcome adversity on his own, an image that seemed to reflect Lee's real life as much as his screen persona. Few people realized that this success helped him achieve something remarkably rare in the entertainment industry. Lee Majors became one of the very few actors to headline hit television series across 3 consecutive decades. From The Big Valley in the 1960s to The $6 Million Man in the 1970s, and then The Fall Guy in the 1980s, he continually found ways to adapt and thrive in an industry that never stopped changing. In his personal life, Lee also tried to rebuild his happiness. He married model Karen Velez and welcomed 3 more children. However, that marriage eventually came to an end as well. After many years together, they separated, leaving Lee with another lesson about the things people cannot always hold on to. But unlike earlier periods of his life, Lee was no longer chasing fame or trying to prove anything to the world. Time seemed to have changed him. He began searching for peace rather than new heights of success. Then, in 2002, Lee married Faith Cross. This marriage brought him something he had perhaps been searching for all along: stability. There were no overwhelming media pressures, no demanding schedules forcing them to live in different places. For the first time in a very long while, Lee's life became simpler. Yet even though he had moved on and built a new life, one chapter remained unfinished. Because many years after the divorce, just when time seemed to have erased the distance between them, an unexpected phone call from Farrah Fawcett brought memories of the past rushing back. By the late 2000s, the lives of Lee Majors and Farrah Fawcett had taken completely different paths. They were no longer husband and wife, nor did they appear together as they had during Hollywood's golden years. But that did not mean their connection had vanished entirely. In 2009, while Farrah was battling cancer, she unexpectedly called Lee on her 62nd birthday. Their conversation lasted around 40 minutes. There were no accusations about the past and no questions about what had happened between them years earlier. It was simply 2 people who had once meant a great deal to each other, reflecting on the road they had traveled. Lee later recalled that Farrah's voice still carried the warmth he had always known. Although illness had taken a toll on her health, she remained interested in his life and the well-being of his family. It was a conversation that made him realize that some relationships, even after changing shape over time, never disappear completely. A few months later, Farrah Fawcett passed away at the age of 62. The news shocked Hollywood. To millions of fans, she was a beauty icon of an entire generation. But to Lee Majors, she was someone who had once held a special place in his heart. What stands out is that Lee never turned that loss into a bitter story. In interviews afterwards, he always spoke about Farrah with affection and respect. He did not dwell on old wounds, nor did he try to retell the story in a way that cast himself as the victim. Instead, he chose to remember the very best things about the woman he had once loved. Then, an unexpected detail emerged after Farah's death. In her will, she left Lee Majors $100,000. In terms of financial value, it was not an enormous amount, but its meaning went far beyond the figure itself. Many saw it as a final expression of gratitude to the man who had helped her take her first steps in Hollywood. It was an acknowledgement that, despite everything that had happened between them, Lee had remained an important part of her life. What drew even more public attention was the fact that Ryan O'Neal, the man who had shared Farah's final years, did not receive a similar inheritance. For Lee, however, it was neither a victory nor a delayed vindication. It was simply a reminder that time can change many things, but it cannot completely erase the marks people leave on one another's lives. And perhaps it was the way Lee Majors faced those losses that created his most valuable legacy, not as a television star, but as a true gentleman. At 87, Lee Majors is no longer the young actor racing across Hollywood film sets or the action star who once dominated television screens. Time has changed everything. Yet when looking back at his life from beginning to end, the most striking thing is not his fame, but the way he responded to the challenges life placed before him. He lost his parents before he was old enough to remember their faces. He endured broken marriages. He experienced the pain of losing the woman he loved to a close friend. These are the kinds of experiences that could leave many people carrying bitterness for the rest of their lives. But Lee Majors chose a different path. For decades, he never publicly attacked Ryan O'Neal, nor did he portray himself as a victim in search of public sympathy. Even when discussing the most painful events of his life, Lee maintained a rare sense of composure. He accepted that everyone makes their own choices, and that not every love story ends the way we hope it will. Perhaps that is why, when he speaks about Farrah Fawcett today, there is no resentment in his words. What remains is gratitude for the beautiful memories they once shared. Although life led them in different directions, Lee chose to remember her as an important part of the journey he lived. That is also why this story is not really about betrayal or a broken marriage. It is about how a person faces loss without allowing that loss to change who they are. It is about remembering someone without turning that memory into a weapon. And perhaps after all the films, the awards, and the glorious years of Hollywood, that is what people will remember most about Lee Majors. Not the $6 million man on screen, but a real man who experienced love, loss, and the passage of time, yet preserved his dignity all the way to the end. If Lee Majors' story made you reflect, share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy stories about Hollywood, lives filled with triumphs and setbacks, and the little-known realities behind the glamour, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss our upcoming videos. Thank you for watching.